The structure of today's webinar is that our goal is to make it as interactive as possible, share tools and techniques to help you ace your next interview. The session is going to be recorded. We will pause at the end of each slide to take questions. However, feel free to put your questions in the chat as well as we go along, and we will also have a Q&A at the end. Our presenter today is happy to stay back for a few minutes to have a chat with anyone who would like to ask him any questions outside of the session. So let's work together and make the most of this opportunity, create a productive experience for everyone who's involved. So I want to introduce our presenter. Our presenter today is Zahir Mohammed. Zahir is a performance intelligence manager for the National Performance Team, NHS England. Zahir has over 20 years of employment within NHS with considerable recruitment experience, and he will be speaking to you today about the skills, techniques, tips necessary to help you stand out from the crowd at job interviews. So thank you very much, Zahir, for sharing this time with us today to give us this insightful session. Without further ado, I would hand over to Zahir. Whilst he's checking and gauging your responses to the poll, I will be sharing my screen, which has the slide decks.
Brilliant. Thank you. Trying to get my technology working. So for people who don't know me, I've just been introduced by Antonia. That's right. My job title has since changed since the last session. So I'm now the Senior Reporting Analyst for the Workforce Training Education function for NHSC, essentially doing the same job but in a different title. So yeah, I've had 20 years of experience. I'll start off with a disclaimer. I'm not a HR person, but what I can offer it is my own experiences and how to learn from people as well. So there are 9 slides. There are 9 slides. And these will be shared with after the session, so you don't need to worry about scribbling notes down. And as Antonia said, we're going to stop after each slide and stop any questions if you want to boo or cheer or what you're going to do, throw any virtual eggs, whatever you want to do. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that are posted in the chat as well. So if somebody can, because I'm looking at 2 screens, so somebody can read out the expectation of the day after we've gone through this slide, and then we can flex on that as well. Any other questions that land our way as well. I kind of feel that we'll get more benefit from our mutual conversations. I'm hoping this can be quite interactive, which is why I've kind of contained it to 9 slides. And I recognise that you're already familiar with much of the content in the slides, so I didn't want to insult anyone's intelligence. So as I said, I'm here to share my experiences, but I'm also very, very keen to learn from experiences of people on the call as well. But what would be helpful is just to get an idea. If people can just raise their hands and just give an indication of whether they've actually been on interview panels themselves. Clearly, you've been interviewed to secure the roles, but have anyone been on interview panels on the other side of the fence? That's good to know. Oh, that's quick. Great. Okay. Well,
we've got 67% of people who have been on an interview panel, which is quite impressive.
It's really good. I'll select mine as well if I've missed the deadline. So, as Antonia said, I ran a job application workshop for the HPCA in April. I think it was back in April.
Yes.
And clearly people found it helpful. So then I was asked to run a session on interview preparation and techniques. So for those people who were not able to attend that session, I'm sure, Antonia, I don't know if the slides have been shared with all the members.
Yeah, the previous slides will be shared along with this one.
Brilliant. And there's also a YouTube video if you want to subject yourself for 90 minutes of punishment from me. But there's some really helpful hints and tips in there. So clearly people found that helpful. So yeah, sorry. I'll get to the agenda in a second. So as I said, I've had 20 years of experience in NHS. I've reviewed probably over 500 job applications. I must have interviewed at least about 100 candidates in the time I've been working in NHS. So what I've done, I've kind of prepared my slides on the basis that the interviews are going to be held remotely, but we can also discuss face-to-face interview scenarios. If people want to stop at the appropriate juncture to discuss that, that's fine. And I know it's NHS job interviews, but essentially the principles apply across the board. So in terms of the agenda, you'll see it's quite broad, and I wanted to keep it like that so we can flex around that. I'm hoping we can get through the slides within about an hour and 15 minutes. So we have time to discuss people's experiences at interviews. There are obviously those hints and tips that people may find helpful, and the contents of the slides are not particularly exhaustive. There's lots out there. People can do their own research. And if people think that I'm missing something really obvious, please do interject and stop and drop a note in the chat, or let me know at the end of the slide. So I'm just pause there. Any questions before we start? That's good to know. So if we can move to the next slide, please, Antonia. So just for those colleagues who were not at that previous session, I'm just going to do a very, very quick recap on the job application session. So as I said, I found from my experiences that in shortlisting for job applications, that I found that the caliber of job applications are often quite poor. We're not great at marketing ourselves. So it's an opportunity for us to, a great opportunity to write a really impactful jobs application. And so if we can impress the recruiting manager, find out a unique selling point, which I'll touch upon about that later, we can present ourselves in a really different league when shortlisting, when the shortlisting is done. It's staggering that people just block, copy, paste stuff from previous applications, and they don't tailor the application for the role at hand, so they really sell themselves short. So we talked about that. We also talked about, start listing your achievements and successes right now. Think about your day-to-day activities, on a week-to-week basis, any key achievements, anything that you feel you're particularly proud of, what you've delivered. And the job advert might have a short deadline, so it'd be helpful to start gathering your information around that. This will also help you kind of identify your unique selling point that distinguishes you from other applicants. We also talked about the CAR model and the STAR model. It's a CAR is challenge, action, result, and the STAR models situation, task, action, result. So essentially the same thing. So what challenge were you faced with, what action you took, and what was the result? So what this will do is when you're filling in the application, it will give you a real opportunity to provide specific examples rather than give general answers or broad answers around that. So they're looking for specific examples. We also suggested speaking to the recruiting manager before you apply and ask them questions to learn more about the role on offer, but also gauge their personality in a really informal setting. And to see if you can build a rapport with them. Can you work with them? Do you think that's the kind of person you can report to them? And it's really helpful because interviews, we know this is kind of an artificial environment, so it's really hard to make judgments in an interview because you focus on answering the questions. So I strongly advise people to speak to the recruiting manager, and you can tease some stuff out there that can then weave into the job application itself and any interviews if people get shortlisted. So we find that really helpful. So we talked about the job applications should only state facts, people that almost self-praising and give themselves wonderful reps. I'm an excellent communicator, I'm a wonderful team player. Well, they don't want to see that. What they want to know is, give examples of when you communicated something so well, you sold a proposal, serving it to people with different stakeholders, with different interests. How did you win them over? Would you do things differently? Those kind of give specific examples around that. But whilst the application, and this is important, whilst the application should state facts, you should also try to bring out your personality, what appeals to you about that role and employer. Why do you want to do that job? About your passion, your drive, your determination, your values, behaviors, what you think you can offer and deliver in that role. And what we also looked at is that, so let's say you're currently a band 7 job, but actually you want to apply for a band 8A. Well, sorry, I don't know what the bandings are for the HPC, apologies for that, but you want to apply for a higher level job, what I would suggest you do is research on jobs that are 2 bands higher and just look at what is it that those jobs are delivering that the lower banded jobs are not. And then you can anticipate that in a few years' time, this is what you expect to commit yourself on, deliver that. So it goes to show in the application that you're already thinking ahead, not only just immediately settling into the job, but you kind of gradually hoping to graduate into high banded roles really quickly because you're confident about your delivery on this role. So it's really important to do that. So we also talked about using really powerful action words. There is also the slides in the job application workshop PowerPoint slide. It contains those action words, and trying to start using those as well. But again, using examples. So and also really crucially, I said the supporting information. So I'm looking at NHS application at this stage, but I'm sure other applications are very, very similar. At the back end of the application form, once you've filled in your roles and responsibilities, we talked about undersitting that is achievements, but also supporting the supporting information, structure the supporting information section in the same order as a person spec, so there's a clear read through between one and the other, and they can easily see the evidence. And also give examples. We talked about the car model earlier, and against each criterion that's there in the person spec, please give an example, even if you feel actually I don't meet that criterion. Let's say someone who's not trained in project management, but they want to get a job as a project analyst or as an assistant project manager. Well, you can say, well, I know the principles about that. I know what it entails, and I've done academic learning and I've done my research. So you don't miss a trick. So that one thing could tip it over the edge and say, you know what, this person knows what they're talking about. They've not had any exposure, but I think they'll do well because they're quite well in the application overall. So we also talked about ensuring it's amazing, absolutely staggering that something as significant as an application form, in many instances, it's riddled with grammatical and spelling errors. Absolutely staggering. So please review it several times before submission. Have a family member or friend who's completely unfamiliar with the subject. Ask them to read it and see if they understand the message you are trying to convey. And the art of doing applications or reports or briefings is trying to explain something in a succinct fashion and in a non-technical audience. So these are some helpful hints and tips in the job application slide deck. I said there's a there's a YouTube video as well that was recorded, so avail yourself to that if you want to. So I'm just going to stop there before we get to the next slide. Any questions? Sorry, I'm not reading the chat, so if there's anything, someone's got questions. How long should the personal statement be? Well, the supporting information, I'm assuming, Beata, you're talking about the supporting information. Well, in all honesty, and I can't remember what the limit is on NHS job applications. I think it might be 1,500 words, but if you can get your message across against each thank you. So if you can get your message across in 1,000 words, and you're confident that you've answered all the things, do it in 1,000, because this thing is, we're not expecting them. Bear in mind, for one vacancy, you might get 50 applications. And so it gets a bit unsettling for recruiting managers. Everyone's busy. So what you want to do is don't give them a haystack and expect them to find a needle. Just give them a bunch of needles. So this is why I was talking about a clear read across from the person spec to the person spec criteria, each criterion, and give an example against each one. And I'll talk about later on about the scoring shortlisting criteria, and I'll put that in the chat as well for people. And you need to be exceeding that in every instance. Say, I know this, I know the subject, here's a clear example, this is what I've done. And interviews, we'll talk about the type of questions you're going to face, and then you can answer those. So in terms of applications, 1,500 words is the maximum, but if you can get your message across shorter, I've done it in 700 words. Because the person spec wasn't that detailed. Absolutely. So really the art of think about when you're writing a briefing for a senior manager or for a meeting. You know, you're not going to overwhelm them with details. In 5 minutes, you need to get your message across. So that's, and it really stand out. Otherwise, you're reading through lines and lines and lines, and the reader will forget what they read previously, and they're forcing to get that information out of it. So you want to give them those nuggets on that basis. So is the mentioned structure of bullets preferred? Sorry, is the mentioned structure of bullets, etc., preferred to? Well, I've used bullets. I've used short paragraphs, but what I've done more important than that is, you know, the person spec. I've actually structured it. I've actually copied the person spec right into a Microsoft Word file, and I put headings and subheadings, and I've answered each one. So when you copy it across, it's a clear read through between them. So whether you use bullet points, underlined subheadings, that's fine. But what you don't want is long, detailed paragraphs, because it just puts people off. So just wondering what else is there in there. Have I missed anything else? Any questions? Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
No, that's fine.
Thank you. Is there, shall I move to the next slide? Any questions? Checking. Yes, Alexandra, agree. It does take ages, which is why I was saying if you've got a short turnaround for the responses, if the deadline's quite tight, then I think what we'll do is start gathering your evidence now, your background, your achievements. So think about the jobs you've done. So don't just write the roles and responsibilities, but under each role, think about what your key achievements are. We'll talk about that a bit more later, about the unique selling point and how to, you know, you might save time, you might improve the quality, you might save money, improve reputation, all that kind of stuff, improve accuracy. So definitely think about your key achievements and start putting almost like your CV or a template together now. So when the appropriate vacancy arises, you can just lift and drop stuff into it. Yeah, it's frustrating, but some of these, once you've filled them, once you've created an account with Track, it should preserve the old applications, and you can hopefully just copy it across to the new vacancy application that you see, and then tweak it a little bit. So hopefully that will be too taxing. So this is slide 4 about what we need to do before the interview. So just to get to, if you've been shortlisted for interview, then genuinely pat yourself on the back. So you know, the competition is really tough out there. Each vacancy, you know, each vacancy attracts up to probably beyond 30 applicants, particularly in the difficult climate now. And whilst many of those probably do not meet the criteria, you know, as I said before, we need to be really strong at selling ourselves and marketing ourselves, because you might end up getting into the maybe pile rather than the definite pile. So the absolute, we'll talk about, sorry, we talked about in application about how to promote and market yourself in job applications. So, however, you know, you may well be shortlisted for an interview or several interviews. But that should not stop you applying for other jobs that interest you. Until you've secured a job, then, you know, the ball shouldn't stop there. Just carry on rolling, carry on doing that. So, you know, we've all sat exams. I'm sure many of us have delivered presentations. Clearly, we've all had interviews because we're in employment, and they may seem scary. And I have to confess, you know, I used to be terrified, and I've delivered some good presentations. I've delivered absolutely atrocious ones, and the clear evidence of that is the lack of preparation. So whether you sit in an exam or go for a driving test, deliver a presentation, have interviews, you know, they are only hard if we do not prepare for them. So if we plan and prepare, I think we can really flourish and enjoy the experience. And I have to say, when I got the job interview for HPCA about 10 years ago, I really enjoyed, and you know, because it kind of, by preparing for it, I rehearsed the presentation and I was settled quite quickly. And I have to say, the interview panel members had to make you feel at ease as well. But what they did, you know, once they made me feel at ease, and you know, my confidence started to develop, and I wouldn't stop talking. So and the rest is history. So, But again, unfortunately, it's the way the cookie crumbles. The interview might last an hour, but you may end up preparing for it. It may take many hours. So bear that in mind. And whilst the art interviews are really a kind of artificial environments, we all have to experience them. And if you plan well, we can enjoy the experience. It's an opportunity to bring out your personality, and hopefully, excuse me, the recruiting manager will already have got a sense of your personality when you will have spoken to them or with them informally prior to submitting an application. And I'm a strong proponent of that, as from both sides. So you get to, oh, this person's really keen, and they want to learn more about the role rather than send a random application without speaking to the manager. So if you apply, when you apply, definitely pick up the phone and set up a Teams call and contact the recruiting manager. So as I said before, if you plan and prepare well for the interview, you can really market yourselves and enjoy the experience. It'll give you a huge confidence boost, and that'll get your creative juices flowing as well. So again, if you've marketed yourself well, you meet the criteria, so the interview essentially is now, if the recruiting panel members and the recruiting manager in particular felt from your application, if you do not meet the criteria, they will not shortlist you. So looking at the application, they're confident you can do the job. Now the interview is kind of being held essentially to validate your understanding of the role and to assess whether you are kind of an ideal fit into the role and with the team. But it's also for you to assess if you want to work with that team too. It's a two-way street. So one thing I've said is this is also important about research. Sorry, where's it gone? Am I in the? I don't know where I am now. But anyway, so read up on the employees' publications and board papers, because that shows that you're being resourceful, you're researching it, and you can weave some of those into the application as well as the interview as well to what latest developments. Let's say they've created a new community of practice for project managers. Well, so you said I see the value in that. I think there's benefits there. We've got a pool of experts there we can reach out to when we've got challenges. So lots of things you can do. So you can weave those into the interview. So sorry, I don't know where. Can you just go back one? I don't know where I am. Also, sorry, go back a step, please. Sorry, I don't know where I am now. Sorry, the previous slide. Is that it? Right. So review your list of successes, anticipate questions. So can you go down a little bit? Car model, yeah. We talked about what we said. So that's where we are at the bullet 3. So you can anticipate. You can genuinely, it might be hard to believe, but genuinely you can anticipate many interview questions because you know the subject. If you're applying for a project manager's role or a program manager, you can broadly kind of anticipate the type of questions that you're going to be faced with. We will look at some in a bit, but the questions ordinarily will be scenario-based ones or competency-based ones. Remember the car model we talked about earlier. Well, the question will be like, can you give me an example when you did this, and this? Would you do things differently? What was your approach? Or there might be, can you give an example of how you would approach this situation? So that's why having those examples ready at hand that you will have weaved into the application as evidence, you can kind of then accentuate and kind of add and supplement those kind of comments in there into your interview. So in terms of that, plan your responses from your job application, your list of achievements. So your unique selling point, what are your achievements? So you might have saved time, you might have saved money, you might have delivered a project before by the due date. You'll have completed your milestones, you'll have added resources, you might have improved accuracy, improved quality, improved reputation, and these are absolutely pivotal to your sense of your list of achievements. So there are some, we'll do it later on, but there are some examples of some interview questions that people, I think broadly speaking, might be asked. And you look at those like, yeah, actually, those are really helpful. So, and then we can talk about other questions later on as part of the discussions where people feel, actually, I've been asked this question and I wasn't quite ready for it, or have you considered this based on our nature of our kind of background and professions. I did say research. You can do your own research for interview questions for your respective professions. You can prepare model answers and go through them so you're really, really familiar with them and are ready and confident. And as I said before, many, many times, always, always, always give specific examples rather than general statements. People say, well, I work well with other people, I work well in a team. That's not going to win points. They're looking at how you've delivered really, really well, because they want to see that as evidence that you can deliver that in their role. So get your cap on that you're already in that role and you're delivering for them. So again, as I said, you'll have already spoken to the recruiting manager prior to submitting your application. So you can use your own question that you'll have discussed with them, as well as any others when it's your turn to ask them questions as well. And I've got some questions in slide 8, some examples, but again, that's not exhaustive. So, we can talk about some of those as well. And Kath Baxter, who's a voice coach, I don't know if anybody knows her. I put links at the end of the last slide. She's a voice coach and has some amazing advice on how we can project our voice when talking, when we deliver presentations, or when we're sitting, for interviews. And she talks about how we should pause to formulate answers instead of umming and erring and that kind of stuff. And I find it incredibly helpful. And one of the things that comes to mind is when President Joe Biden, when he's talking and he's at the podium, and it just lowers the tempo a little bit and it just almost whispers, and you feel you have to lean in to listen to him. So things like that are really valuable, and she's got some fantastic advice. There's a few YouTube videos in there, and like I said, there's about 6 or 7 links there. I'd definitely encourage you to take some time out and look at those, because I've done a lot of research, and of all the things out there, I found these the most helpful and direct for the purpose of our discussions. And we'll go through some of those examples. So, and also in the last slide is a link on using breathing techniques. And I was dismissive of all this, I have to confess, right? But it absolutely works magic, slow and deep inhale from the nose and slow and deep release from the mouth. And if you do this for 5 or 10 minutes before your interview starts, you'll just be far more composed. You'll be relaxed. The nerves will drop because dopamine levels are lowered, and that has a calming effect. Absolutely amazing how that works. And all the nerves, and you might be jittery a little bit, and that all dissipates. So absolutely amazing. So please, I'd encourage, and obviously the links there at the end. There's lots you can check on YouTube as well. I'd also say hold practice interviews with friends, colleagues, family members, and take learning from that feedback. And what I said, what I've done with a family member, excuse me, I've sent them a link to a Teams meeting, and when they joined the call, I pretended we were strangers, and I didn't have any informal discussion with them. I spoke to them about that, went straight to the interview, mock interview, and after the interview, I gave some feedback to them in a formal setting, so it didn't even give the impression that we were related. There's one about next one, our presentation. So you may well be asked to do, as you guide you up the ranks, you may well excuse me, be asked to present as part of your interview. Now, often the presentation shouldn't last more than 5 minutes, and the key thing here is rehearsal. You need to know your subject. You need to give your own proposals, and this is, delivering presentations. This is a separate topic entirely. So I'm not going to go into the details, but things like you'd say, introduce yourself, informal, introduce yourself, what the purpose of the presentation is, what the scenarios, what the challenge is. So what are your kind of proposals, suggestions? How will you decide on the course of action? How do you see improvements being made? What evaluation techniques will you use? And summarize what you've just discussed and conclude and thank the listeners and obviously keep to the time. And it's an art form, this. When I recruited into my team about 3 years ago, one of the candidates who contacted me said, well, 5 minutes for an interview, that's not enough. I said, I agree with you, it's not enough. Unfortunately, some of our really senior colleagues, when you're doing presentations, they don't give you more than 5 minutes. So you need to get your message across, thinking about the needle, not the haystack, and get your message precise on the dot. And our reporting and briefings should be really, really concise to get those messages across. Think of a BBC News article. You've got your heading, you've got a picture, you've got a couple of pictures, you've got headings, and you've got 2 or 3 paragraphs, and you're going to read more, and in the periphery you have all the related articles. But well, 1 or 2 hops, you go away fully informed about that subject area. So keep it really, really concise, but do rehearse that. So I'm going to pause there before we move to the next slide. Any questions anybody would like to ask? Anything in the chat that's come through? Nothing? That's good. Have you all?
No question in the chat.
So you're all there. You're not left the meeting. That's good. It's the eerie silence. I'm talking to myself. Right. Okay. So the next slide, please. I think have I been through that? Oh yeah. So what's the next bullet point there? Okay. So at the interview, you need to be prepared to do about 80% of the talking, and not just the talking. You need to dominate. We collectively need to dominate the room. We need to control the tempo of the meeting, and we've got to remember they need you. They're the employers, the recruiting managers. They need you as much as you need them. They've seen something in your application that really appeals to them. So here you are. I said, look, you needed me as well, so let's discuss and see whether it's the right balance for us both. And in the job application workshop, we talked about making yourself indispensable, or at least impossible to ignore. This is why I'm a strong proponent of talking, using your unique selling points and giving really specific examples and how you would promote and grow the role you're in. And there's lots of things you can do. So ensure there's plenty of lighting, ensure your laptop's charged, the desk is clear of any clutter, and all other applications are closed. There's no harm and there's no shame in having, post-it notes stuck around the bevel of your laptop or on your desk. And obviously at work, we kind of refer to our notes when we're delivering presentations. So there's nothing wrong with that. And so obviously, if you're trying to read answers like that, that's not quite the right way to approach, but be ready online and at least 10 minutes before the interview, so you can do your breathing techniques. All this. And so before you interview, do that. Take long, deep breaths. Inhale deep from the nose, hold for a moment, and exhale slowly and deeply from the mouth. Ensure there are no interruptions. If you have pets, I don't know, give them a tranquilizer or tie them to the garden tree. Same goes for children, if you so wish to do that with your children. Kath Baxter has advised also, I'm not going to do this here, but she's advised also to stretch and loosen the muscles of your mouth, which will really help you project your voice. I'm not going to do that here, but there's lots out there in the link, and you're stretching your mouth. I'm not going to imitate it here because it's being recorded. And please do this before the interview starts, otherwise it'll look a bit bizarre if you're doing it during the interview. So bear in mind, researches of communication have concluded that 55% of communication is non-verbal, is body language, facial expressions. Sorry, Rafia, the links are at that back end of the slide set. We'll get to that in a few moments. So the research, 55% is non-verbal, that's body language. 38% is vocal, which is tone and pitch, and only 7% is words. That's all it is. So, you might go away after all this. Well, I don't know, can't remember half the thing you're saying, but all I realized, the guy was quite animated you understand how that get? So that's why when at interviews, so the interview people, panel members, they'll be making notes. That's fine. So think about when we meet people for the first time, we make quick judgments about their friendliness, assertiveness, appearance, and without even uttering a single word, without even realizing, people use non-verbal communication to size people up. So, and when we are nervous, and we've all been through it, we can talk about that, when we get to question answers. When we are nervous and stressed, we tend to tighten all parts of ourselves. Muscles are tense, breathing is shallow, the thought process has become quite narrow and constrained, so you can't talk about the creative juices and stuff like that. So, and so feeling nervous at interview can really prevent us from performing well at the interview. And you kind of, we can't, we're not able to connect with the panel members. We can't exude confidence. We can't think critically and talk about all the wonderful things we are prepared for because the nerves are getting the better of us. Which we talked about some techniques about stretching the mouth muscles and doing breathing as well, and rehearsing stuff, having mock interviews, lots of stuff we can do. So in terms of the body posture as well, make sure you've got the correct posture, remain attentive, no slouching or leaning so far into the camera so it makes like you're dominating them right into the camera. So those things. I'm going to pause there before I get to the next slide. Any other questions? Okay.
There's no questions ahead.
That's good. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, just give me a second. So, as I said a moment ago, the interview panel members, obviously they'll be making notes. Don't let that put you off. Focus on the specific questions being asked. We've all been through, well, most of us been through interviews where people are sat opposite us on a desk and they scribble notes down, and you don't know whether, well, I wonder what they're writing about me there. But you should be there answering the question. The panel members, they have to score your answers based on a scale. So I've just put my mouse moving. I'll just put it in the chat that, broadly speaking, these are the kind of the criteria they use to score people, and they have to give really specific examples. So what'll happen if you've been on the interviewer side of stuff, they'll have your name at the top somewhere, you'll have your list of questions, and you'll have a box with all the gaps where they write notes, and they'll have scoring criteria at the end. And in every instance, you have to aim for 5. Even if you think, well, actually, I've got no exposure, no experience in this. Well, if you research on that area, because the questions should be fair questions based on the job description, the person spec, and the job advert. And what I've said to people, when you see the job advert, bear in mind, once the closing dates happen, that job advert disappears from there. So when you see a vacancy, do a screen grab of the job advert, paste it to a Word file or save it down, because the things that are written in the job advert, they're really specific and directly related to the job on offer, whereas the job description, person spec, so in some instances, they're quite generic in nature. So that will draw your attention. Oh yeah, they wanted somebody with, I don't know, benefits management experience. Oh, that's interesting. So I'll learn about that, even though I've not had any experience. But if they see a really good application, and just because they might have some gaps in some parts of it, well, actually, that's not a bad thing, because what we don't want to do is get somebody who knows everything about everybody, and 6 months later they leave. So in every instance, give a top-notch example, even if you not in that experience or knowledge, but as long as you can emphasize, look, I've no exposure to this, but these are principles, and this is how I would apply it in these scenarios. So hopefully that makes sense. So, but a good interviewer, they'll really make you feel at ease. And when that happens, they'll welcome you with a smile, ask how you're feeling, advise you that, they're really impressed with the application and wanted to meet you to learn more about you. And I think then they might think you're good, they may be a good fit for the role based on the application. And often from our side, we have to smile, maintain eye contact, remain courteous. Obviously, thank them for shortlisting our application and for taking time to meet them as well. They'll probably explain the format of the interviews, about they might have to do a presentation for 5 minutes. There'll be Q&As. There'll be probably about 7 or 8 questions that they're all sort of split out between themselves to ask, probably no more than 10. And in total, and each panel member will be asking those. So the examples of anticipated questions, we've discussed a few of them earlier, but we'll get to the next few slides that'll be there. But you can research other questions directly related to your professions. You'll also ask them questions themselves. We'll talk about those as well. I'm moving around a little bit, apologies, but so it's important that you listen to the question in full, and you will be amazed how this works. After the question is asked, I know people want to launch straight into the answers and get the ordeal of the interview out of the way. I wouldn't consider it as an ordeal. I think, you know what? I'm really engaged. I'm really passionate. I want to show them what I can offer them. And you'll just be boosted with energy and confidence. But after each question is asked, just pause for a second or two. That's all, 1 or 2 seconds. And it's amazing how those couple of seconds will allow you to formulate your thoughts and help you answer those questions really clearly. The question will be very, very specific, and they will be fair. So make sure you give specific fact-based answers. And that's why I keep talking about the CAR model. You can refer to the information, the job application, your list of achievements, even stuff that you've done outside of work, any extracurricular stuff. Let's say, as an example, you don't manage people here, but you're a manager of a football team on a Sunday afternoon. Yeah, you've got the skills and experiences and, all that kind of stuff. So elaborate on those. And we talked about in the second bullet point, and I think it's really, really poignant, this is that when we are being interviewed, try to use the term we in our answers. So you give the impression that we are already part of the team. So if they say, well, can you example when you would do something that says, I think we should work on this basis, I think we should be. So you're already saying, actually, we're already at a collective, we're already as a team, rather than I think you should do that, I think your team should do that. So that's really helpful. So you're already trying to almost programming them to say, you know what, I'm already working with you on here. So I think that also talked about, you may have, I hope nobody has that, but you may well have had negative experiences in the previous roles. Obviously, don't talk about that, but talk about what you've learned from those experiences. How did you overcome those? You might have, let's say, you talked about line management responsibilities, and well, they'll say, have you had any challenges? Yeah, we had challenges. These are things we saw experience, and I've done all this management development programs and other things, and this is how we dealt with it and all that. That's fine without dwelling too much. Talk about how you can make improvements in the role, right? So, and not only deliver on the job. So from job description what the expectation is. So what would you then do? It's a bit difficult because you need to understand the environment in which you're going to be operating before that happens. But from experience, your knowledge, your research of jobs at high-banded jobs and what they deliver in the devising policy and strategy and shaping how program management is delivered for the organization. Well, all that. So, and the collaboration with networks, universities, how you work with the community of practices, all those kind of stuff, and what you think you can offer. And so think of those even in the job application of what you think you can offer in that role. So read upon more senior roles in that field we talked about and learn what the senior roles are doing so you can make suggestions to the role on offer. So, if you're asked a question that you're not sure of, you can always ask them to defer that question till a bit later and allow you to think about some answers. There's no harm in that. We're all human beings. I've done it. So if you're asked a scenario-based question, we talked about this, touched upon it earlier. So can you just, I'm going to give a real example. So, and this is a broad sense. So apologies because I'm program management colleagues on the call and think this is a boring, simple example, but can you give an example when you've managed a project? So if for instance, you've not managed a project, what would you say? So what I would do, I'd say, well, actually, I'll explain what training I've undertaken. So you might have done, APM training. How would you manage a project? Well, things like establish a project steering group, agree, the benefits at the start, have, people to hopefully do benefit management, have benefits at the start, what are the benefits that you want to realize at the end, and have that in mind first, what are the intended outcomes. Talk about producing a project initiation document, the PIDs, how you would elicit finance and staff resources, how do you get buy-in from very senior colleagues and project champions and exec sponsors, and that kind of mutually agree smart milestones and objectives, have clear ownership, clear ownership, understand, be clear about governance and escalation processes, ensure regular reporting and accountability, how you'd manage risks and resolve issues. You can see without even if you not manage a project where you explain the principles of what you would do, and again, think about an example. So you might work in a team that has to, I don't know, in the cancer and diagnostics, for instance, and you can talk about, well, actually, understand what that role requires, and you can use examples from the role on offer about how, I don't know, we want to increase reporting radiographers or clinical endoscopists to reduce the strain on doctors in hospitals and do evaluations and feedback. So you can use this as a model, even though you've not been trained in project management. So I went on a bit with that, but I thought that's helpful. So at the close of the interview, the recruiting panel member, the recruiting manager will thank you for your attending. They will definitely do that for their time, and they'll advise you when you expect to hear from them. And of course, thank them individually. And what I would also say is when you speak with them before you submit your application with the recruiting manager, at the end of that conversation, I've mentioned this in this earlier slide set for the job application, thank them then. And what I've done in the past is when I've had that conversation, I've essentially said to them, I'd like to thank you for your time. Really appreciate you taking time out to speak to me on this. It's been a pleasure meeting you, and it's all informally. And whether I get shortlisted or not, I just want to wish you the best for all the recruitment with your recruitment, and thank you for your time. And it's absolutely amazing. So at the end of the interview as well, thank them individually. The names will be there. Quote their names, and for considering the application, for taking the time to meet you, and say look forward to the feedback. I'll finish up by saying whatever the outcome, you wish them the best for the recruitment. Being polite, kind, courteous, they're all traits we need in our working lives. Who knows, that last statement, could clinch the deal, if it's a close call. So that's what I wanted to say there as well. So if you want to go to, sorry, I'll pause there. Any other questions? Oh, sorry. Any top tips on the best sort of question? Yes, I have, Tamsin, and we will share those. We're getting there. We're getting through the slides. Right, slide 7. Unless there's any other questions. No, brilliant. Okay, next slide. So here are some examples, right? Some questions that are likely to be asked. Of course, these are some example of direct and scenario-based questions, but they cover a broad range of traits that interviews panels looking for. So things like your understanding of the role, your team working ability, your communication, time management, conflict resolution, relationship management, your line management style, your focus on delivery of objectives, your project management experience, your level of ambition, what you can offer the team. Broadly speaking, this is all that. And so if you think about all these things, what I'll do, I'll put this in the chat as well, right? Because what you can do, if you can, I've not got it, but I mean, that broadly answers all those. So you can take that and start thinking about examples when you start gathering all your evidence, or preparing your your achievements and successes. Think about examples there. Definitely do that, because the things we talked about there are the broad things that they want to discuss. Interview. It's if and when you get sight of the advert, the person spec and job description, you'll have a more clearer understanding of what the expectations are, and you can kind of do some research and say, do you know what, I want to if I want to research some of these roles online and type of questions that might get asked, and they will be fair questions. You know, I've talked about, well, like one of the things I've said is one of the bullets about what is the most complex piece of work you've done, and why was it complex, and how did you deal with it? So that is really, really precise. So, you know, what you don't want to do is get stumped. So this is why I said, you know, start gathering your evidence, your achievements of success, your unique selling points, and your very, very, very specific examples against each criterion. So when you talk about it, you can just dip into that and say, there's an example, rather than scratching your head and stuff. So those things. So those are some examples. I say it's not exhaustive. There are broad questions, but I genuinely, heartfelt, I'm saying you can probably anticipate 80, 85, 90%, I dare say 90% of the questions you're going to be asked. So what I want to pause there and just ask colleagues if they want to put in the chat, or if they wait a bit later on, or want to speak after the session's over individually, where they were asked questions that were radically different from what they were expecting and they got stumped. What type of questions were they, and why did they find it a challenge? So I don't know whether we should, I think let's wait till the end and we'll discuss that then. If somebody reminds me, please, we'll do that. Thank you. So next slide. So, Tamsin, here's some questions. Next. Sorry. They look identical. Well, that's the one. So here are some examples. And you might have considered some of these when you will have spoken to the recruiting manager before your application. But there will be other questions that might arise during the course of the interview. Absolutely fine. Make some notes as they're talking to you. Oh, that was interesting what they said. I want to learn more about that. So you just kind of tease that out of them. So, well, I think some of these are really helpful because I like to understand how the vacancy has become available. If it transpires that, messages come through. So brilliant, brilliant. That's good to know, Alexandra. So if the vacancies have become available, I don't know, every 6 months, then begs the question: why are people leaving every 6 months? There's something wrong there. So you should try to understand that. So from our perspective, you know what, it's fine as a job. I'll apply for it, but you want to learn a bit more about the history. So thank you for your time, and obviously it's recorded, and we'll share it with you if you so desire to listen to my listen to me rambling on for a long time, but we'll share that with you after. So I'd also ask, what are the short, medium, long-term objectives of the role? So as I said before, the job descriptions, the person spec, sometimes they're broad in nature, and certainly from an NHS perspective, if you make a slight tweak to the job description or the person spec, then it will be subjected to a desktop evaluation. Sorry. I think, Alexander, yeah, some interviews, if they rush 30 minutes back to back, that's poor planning. And particularly when we are doing interviews remotely, what they should do is have an interview and have at least half an hour. It's not just a question. The questions should be included in that hour's interview or 30 minutes interview, but it should also allow them to a moment to reflect on the previous candidate so they can make notes and do the scoring. So it shouldn't really be back to back like that. And that's really unprofessional in my view. So, sorry, about the short, medium, long-term objectives of the role, it's really important, because if you make a slight tweak to the job description or person spec, it'll be subject to agenda for change desktop evaluation, so they can't make the change there. And if that's written in a generic fashion, it's hard to assess what the requirements are. So it's important to ask them about the objectives of the role. And you can do a lot of these questions, you can ask them, before you submit your application. But I think some of those you can elaborate on some of those and ask other ones related to that. I think this is good as well. So you understand to what extent you can be stretched in that role. So what would you say are the most challenging aspects of the role? That's really, really important. So you want to know that. So, you know, let's say you got you work in a politically sensitive environment, and you know, I don't like politics. I don't want to get. I wanted to get the job done, and a lot of restrictions, all that kind of stuff. About the management style of the team and director. I know I don't micromanage my team. We mutually agree objectives and we'll catch up periodically. I don't see them as my subordinates, but my colleagues on whom I depend on their counsel and expertise. So it depends on the management style. And do you like to be micromanaged? Do you like to be told? Do you like, you know, different people have different expectations and demands. And the culture of the organization and the director and the values that they promote is really important. Make sure we treat people with respect and dignity, and we value people for their contributions, and that they allow people to you know, flourish and develop and grow, and you know, that the contributions are being recognized. All those things, you know, it's really important for people, sometimes more than money. So I asked this question as well: would you enjoy most about your job? Right, and often a lot of things that clearly, ultimately, it's about improving patient care, patient experience, and you know, we might well be in the NHS a few kind of layers down the line, kind of divorced from patient care, but we need to understand what we do, how that ultimately impacts on patient care, that kind of stuff. So, what do you enjoy about your job specifically? You know, I might like performance support. I enjoy engaging with people, stakeholders, relationship managers for mutual delivery and that kind of stuff. Frustrations about your job, that's really important. I would ask every member of the panel, what do you find frustrating about your job? Often they'll say, we are kind of bound by internal politics or, you know, urgent deadlines, and we don't have convergence or rationalization of systems and processes. And that's thanks Gemma, appreciate that, thank you. So so it's really important to tease some of that out as well. I talk about what systems and software are being used. I know I don't know HPCA whether PM3 is being used. I know Christine has used PM3 at HE. I don't know what software is being used. So if the new employee uses similar, hopefully it'll be similar systems. But if they use the same one, that's it. We're play exposure. And if they don't, you say, well, I actually know what that system is. I know what it does, and I've done my research on it. You might have somebody working for that team and learn a bit more about what the role involves. Obviously, remote working is a really important thing to ask. There's no harm in asking that interview. In fact, what I would do, I would ask that question before you submit your application, because if there's, and particularly if you're applying for a role in a trust, then actually you'd ask yourself, well, actually, if they've told you there and then, unfortunately, you have to be. I remember when I applied for a role, it's really, really interesting. Actually, I was going to apply, but I inquired about the role, and I asked them about, it was based in Surrey, and I'm based in Bradford. So I asked them about remote working options. They said, well, initially you have to be in the office 2 days a week. I thought, well, I can't go to Surrey twice a week. And then ultimately 5 days a week as well. That rules me out then. So it'll say you have to fill an application. I'd still do the application, so you've got the evidence and it's there, and you as your background as like a tester, so you've got all the evidence gathered together. So it's important to establish that at the outset. It'll save you the pain of filling an application and sitting through an interview. I know people who've actually sat interviews, just they didn't want the job, they just want to experience the interview, they have the interview experience, so it can give them that boost and stuff like that. We'll talk about career development, training opportunity, growth, and that kind of stuff. So it's really important. So those are some of the questions. Hopefully, you found those questions helpful. There are a raft of other ones. There might be really precise and specific ones for your professions or for your specific role for which you're applying, and that will be established when you get sight of the application documents. Is that okay? Thank you, Tandy. Thank you, Tandy. So I'll pause there for any other questions that you've got for me. No, brilliant. Slide 9. So the interview is over. Sorry, I rephrased the interview. The interview is never over until you log off. But the recruiting manager, they'll outline the next steps. They'll give you a timeline as to when they're going to inform you, depending on the interview schedule. And because a lot of these interviews, excuse me, because a lot of these interviews are held remotely, it's not often that they have one day blocked out for interviews, because they can do it quite seamlessly between different days and on people's schedules, and so. But they will let you know, depending on other commitments and other interviews, they'll have to collaborate with the other panel members and reach a consensus, and they will offer you. And trust me, when if they've done well, they will contact you. So think about this. So if they're not sure, they will contact you, say, you know what, it happened to me when they were going to inform me on the same day, and I was called and said, we're really sorry, and my heart sank, and we're really sorry, we were going to inform you today, but we're going to just sleep on it and decide in the morning, so just let you know. So I read that two ways. I said, could it be? Well, I thought, well, that's a bit too close for comfort. I wasn't in different league as I wanted to be, but also I think the positive. Actually, I'm definitely not out of the equation, because otherwise they would say, I'm sorry, you were not successful. So I was definitely not out of the equation, which is brilliant. So on the next day, thankfully, I got the call and said I was up for the role. So if you're offered the job, then great, congratulations, well done. You'll need to agree your own kind of personal circumstances around flexible working arrangements, home working. References will need to be sought as well. So do notify your referees promptly. A written offer will be received, and then you can speak to your current line manager, informing them, and you can mutually agree your leaving dates. You may need to work your notice period according to your contract, but a good manager will allow you to negotiate early departure. Psychologically, you're probably already ready to leave anyway, and you make, as long as there's clear handover. So we'll talk about that as well. So if you've got a good manager, they'll support your career development, whether they work for a different team or a different organization. Because if you stifle their growth and development, they'll end up leaving anyway. So you need to encourage them. Ensure that you leave your current role amicably, regardless of any challenge you may face. And we all, I've had experiences where I've had a quite toxic environment, but I held my head high and I went amicably, by ensuring that I had written procedures for the handover of your work. And I've also made myself available, if you feel inclined to do so, for any guidance with any colleagues for any ongoing work for a short period of time. Definitely do that. So if you're not successful, it's important to get feedback from the recruiting manager to help. It's really important to understand any gaps, to help you in any future interviews. It may be a tough pill to swallow. Recognize that you will have spent countless hours filling in job applications, preparing for interview and sitting in the interview. Just imagine when you've sat exams, a 2-hour exam, you must have probably spent about 50 hours at least preparing for it. So I know interviews are similar to that. So I can understand it can be a bit dejecting. It happens. What we can't do is dictate the kind of competition we're going to face that interview. It may just happen that there's just somebody on that particular day who was just that bit closer matched to the requirements, and who just that little bit presented themselves better on the day. That's all it is. But all the experience, whether good or bad, will be helpful in future applications. Helpful in future application interviews, and you'll gather a lot of information, knowledge to make future applications easier. So Denise, so if you've been offered the job, it's important to be honest at the outset. The difficulties, if you've had 2 interviews around the same time and you want the next interview, the outcome of the next interview to be determined before you decide when you take. And I've been through that as well. So I've been in a position where I've had 2 interviews, but I wanted to hear from the latter one first before I declined this one. And so it would be a bit unfair. And I'd say unfair, I think that's sorry, pardon, that's an unfair word to use. But you have to look after number one. And I've come across people, and I've respected them for this, by the way, where they've accepted the job, and the ball has started rolling about the paperwork and that kind of stuff. And before you've signed the contract, you've already had a response from the other interview and you decided to go for that one. So as a result, and you just notify them, however it is, say, look, I've been offered another job, and I want to thank you for, offering me this one. I really appreciate it. They will already had somebody, and they won't be interviewing one person. They'll interview about 6, 8 people, so they'll offer the next best candidate, and they'll just get on with it. They'll recruit into the team, and 8 months later, that person will be settled. So don't take it personally. So can you ask for feedback from application if we were not offered interview? Absolutely. I'm sorry to say this, but there has been an instance where of, I don't know, 50 applicants for a role, I've interviewed, I've shortlisted, and the person, and we use proper scoring criteria to shortlist them because we need to provide the evidence and record it on the application system on the NHS jobs, whatever it's called now. And then you have to give example, no direct experience, no direct academic qualification, this, that, and that, just tick boxes and stuff. But one of the applicants contacted me and want to know why they did not get shortlisted. Well, so I looked at the job reference, the application reference, and I don't know how to say this, but of the 40 applicants, you scored the lowest. You've got any direct experience, and you didn't put anything as evidence. And I'm sorry. So if you were not shortlisted for your job application, you'll have they might well it said no feedback is available. I think the problem is, and this is always going to be a challenge. A good recruiting manager should make the time, because you've made the time to fill in an application. So it's fair that the recruiting manager should take time out to give you that feedback, and even it might be brief. So I'm sure it happens with HPCA applications, but even NHS, there are email addresses and there are contact numbers as well. So best thing is probably email them, say this is my application number, because if they reject something from the system, because it's a blind application, they won't often know who it is. So you need to put your application number in the subject heading, and as well as the job title, and give a bit of background. I applied for the job, I wasn't shortlisted. Can you give it a bit more example reasons as to why I wasn't shortlisted? Need some feedback for any further applications. And I have to say, of all the applications I've done, I think there's only been, where I've been rejected, there's only been one instance where, despite me following up 2 or 3 times, they've not responded. And when they've done that, it's left a sour taste in my mouth, and I'm thinking, you know what, I don't want to work with these people because their values and my values are not aligned. So even from that lack of response, it speaks volumes about kind of environment that you would have ended up working. So I think it's fair that it's only fair that a recruiting manager should take time out and provide feedback, and they don't just drop them an email unless you come on in. If they don't come back within a week, drop it. So it's just a follow up from last week. It would appreciate a brief response, and hopefully they'll do it, and do it soon, because 3 weeks will lapse and they'll go on with the regular work, and before we know it, they've moved on. And they might have forgotten about the what they viewed. They'll have to go back to the application. So that's that. So after the interview, get away from the environment, because you'll have been probably overwhelmed with the experience. Take some quiet time out. You can go over the whole process. We do we do, even after interviews and presentations and exams, we always do this post-mortem. So think about, well, where you felt you performed well. Do you feel like you performed as well as you'd expected? Where do you feel you could have provided stronger examples? What areas do you feel you did well in? What would you do differently? And I think so. Can you say a little about reasonable adjustments on interviews? Kind of with, well, so Alexandra, some interview panel members, recruiting team, when we call them, they've actually sent questions out in advance but they sent them to everybody. So it's a fair, and I think that's good policy. And they send it to them in 24 hours before the interview. Some of them send them 30 minutes before the interview and say, look, you'll get them at that time. So so I guess you could ask them about reasonable adjustments. I guess my I don't know. I'm not qualified about the reasonable adjustments for people with disabilities. People maybe autistic. People might have might be might have vision problems or hearing issues and stuff like that. I don't know how that's something that HR may need to speak to about that, but there's no harm in contacting the recruiting manager and say, look, there are these challenges. I'm interested in this job. I've been shortlisted. Sorry, applied for this job. I've been shortlisted, and they should make accommodation, and there needs to be fair across the board, not just one. I don't think they can send questions to one candidate and not all the other ones. So, Alexander, I'm sorry, that's a broad sort of cop out there. I don't know the direct answer to that, but there's no harm in asking. And you can get kind of steer from your own HR teams and say, look, I'm thinking of applying for a job internally, and what kind of things what adjustments can be made for certain individuals for certain needs. So, so can we, unless any other question before I move to slide 10? All right, so, okay, one last thing before we move to slide 10. I think for those people who've not been on the interview panel, who've not had any exposure and experience in that, why don't you reach out to your current line manager or somebody in HR or anybody you know who's going to be going through an interview and ask if you can observe or even participate in interview panels. You don't necessarily need to be the lead recruiting manager, lead panel member, but you can ask to be at the interview panel as an observer, and you can ask one or two questions, and you can see from their side and see what the kind of the structure of the questions are, the type of questions that are going to be asked, and the format of when people writing notes and doing the collaboration later on as well, and scoring and that kind of stuff. So you'll get an idea about the criteria and that kind of stuff. So can you go through slide 10 now, please? Excuse me. So I think we're doing well with time. So we've been through around 7 slides. We've done a recap of the job application process, how to prepare for the interview. Lots we can do before the interview, even before being shortlisted for interviews. So we talk about writing your application. And if you watch the video from the last session, what kind of said is write your application as if you're preparing for an interview. So weave in a lot of stuff, the things that you want to talk about, interview about the examples and what you would do and how you'd improve things and stuff like that. So you're already thinking well ahead of the game. You're past the starting line. You're almost at the finishing line, and so lots we can do for the interview. You can anticipate the questions. You can prepare model answers about using the car model, your unique selling points. One of my nephews is working in the call center for a number of years, and so he's applying for another role now. And so, well, it's quite a generic role. So how would you distinguish yourself? Think about what things you've done that would distinguish you from other applicants with similar backgrounds. So it's hard. That's why it's important right now. Start gathering your evidence, your achievements, your successes in your personal files. You don't need to share it with anybody if you don't want to. Do all that, but also take advantage for any learning and training and development needs. And if you want to, let's say you want to apply for a high banded or graded role, and okay, what is that role offering, asking for that I don't have? Look at the skills and knowledge and training gaps are, and then embark on training to help you develop and grow. As an example, that role might require you to be a line manager, but you've not had any formal line management experience, but you can do coaching or mentoring with people in the team. You can, if you get somebody as a trainee from a graduate, you can oversee that kind of stuff, or you can do any academic learning. There's links in the slide set from the previous session about MOOC, Massive Online Open Courses, and edX, and a lot of courses you can do online. And we've done, you can ask your employees about line management training. So you imagine what you can get from those few things, how much evolution you can get from your training. So can you use the same example in your application? Absolutely. You can use different ones. You can use the same ones. Bear in mind, Denise, the interview is there to get you the application is there for you to get the job, get you the interview. And at the interview, they're going to ask you, say, there's no harm in using the same example. You might need to embellish it and, supplement it. You might need to elaborate in bits. They might want to, they will ask you, all the candidates, the same questions, right? But if they see something in your, oh, that was interesting, I want to learn more about that. They won't score you on that. It just intrigues them. And this is what to keep talking about. Oh, giving those little nuggets in the application. Oh, that was interesting. What they said. They've saved. They've automated processes using Microsoft Excel, and they've reduced the reporting time from 3 days down to 2 hours. I want to know how they've done that. I want to learn. We could do that skill here. So it's giving those nuggets, and and you can definitely use as examples. If you've got other ones, you can use more than one if there's time to do that. I'll say, you know what, you've asked for one example, but I just want to touch upon this as well, if you don't mind. And that's amazing, absolutely. So yeah, a combination of stuff, Denise. So we talked at the interview. So you can anticipate the questions, you learn about other ones, research ones according to your own professions, and prepare model answers. Have them at hand. Go through them regularly at home, so it's not like a day before the interview. When you recall it, when you go through regularly, you'll have to recall it in your mind. So it'll come to mind easily when you've been interviewed. So, and during the interview, we talk about using body language. Oh, brilliant. Best of luck, Thompson, on that. So pausing before answering, projecting your voice, using the CAR model, the challenge, action, result, for scenario-based questions. After the interview, we spoke about the process and next steps if not successful or successful. And we have to recognize that interviews, as I was talking before, they're artificial environments. We're not being our true selves. And that's why it's important to meet them in advance. We as humans, we're quite poor at marketing ourselves. So I think there's really, really great opportunity to take this learning. Honestly, I'm really, really genuinely thinking of taking this next few moments and learning from people's experiences as well. I'll pause there for any other QAs that we've got. We'll have questions at the end as well, but I'm going to stop there for anything on the review and the QAs at this stage. Oh, brilliant. So there's a question that is experience the most important to get the job? Absolutely, experience is important. What happens? I don't know how old I look, but I'm really, really, really old. So when we're newly graduated, and we just entered the employment market, there's a strong focus on ensuring we've got the academic qualifications behind us and a bit of training. But as the years pass by and you develop your experiences, and the experience is relevant, then that is the focus on that. And I don't know how it is for the HPCA, but the NHS job applications, when the person spec comes out with the job description, it says you need to have a degree, undergraduate degree, or a master's or whatever, or equivalent level experience. So I think the experience kind of supersedes the qualifications once you've got a bit of experience. Again, you're part of the bunny, once the experience, you worked in that environment for a number of years. But absolutely they're important, because if you, let's say you don't even talk about your qualifications, then they won't know what's the level of education attainment. And I've seen applications that are really poorly done. They've hardly filled the job applications. It's sporadically populated. They've not done it well, and then that's just a low selling point for them. So again, think about marketing yourself really well, providing a few, golden nuggets and the needles we talked about earlier. So that's that. Any other questions before I go to the useful links? Okay. Next slide. So I said before, excuse me a second. So we won't click into these at the moment. Do this in your own time when the slides are shared. Just give me a second. Sorry, all over the place. So let me move this here. So there are We talked about breathing exercises for interviews. It's really helpful. There are the links to some videos on YouTube as well. I was so embarrassing that we're trying to teach people how to breathe, but I honestly genuinely found it incredibly helpful. I actually did it before this session, so hopefully my nerves were not showing. It's also about showing confidence in interviews as well. How to exude that confidence. You know, I said it's not in our nature to market ourselves. You know, we're not like televangelists or salespeople, but we have to get into that arena and really, really be, like I said, dominate the room and exude that confidence. And obviously, don't be overbearing. Be polite, courteous. You can be animated a little bit. For those people older than me, the call, you might remember Magnus Pike, who used to wave his arms about. Try not to do that, but it will just go to show your passion, and it's really good. That confidence will shine through, and with that confidence, we'll get the creative juices flowing, and you can then really, really get into the depths of the interview. So Denise, so using the star absolutely. So they will say, sorry, right, someone's on off mute. Sorry. So absolutely. So you will give an I example because you're selling yourself, but they will say actually, what you say is that this is what I would do, and this is how we would work together to deliver that. This is how I would work with our team to do the work that I'm doing. So what your work, how will it impact on the team in which you can operate? So it's kind of linking with that. So I recognize you're not going to ask the team to do all that. The car model or your examples are going to be based on your own needs, but you're going to say, this is how I think we can work together. I will do these things, and this is how the impact on our team will be, that kind of stuff. So we also talked about Kath Baxter in her link. There are a few about 6 or 8 minute short. A lot of these videos are quite short; they're not long. Her voice coach, and she's she has a really calming effect, and the way she talks. I'm probably speaking a bit too fast because I'm conscious I had a lot to get through, but she's got a slow tempo and a calm voice, and it projects quite well. So I'm trying, and I've tried my best without umming and ahhing too much in this session. And when I struggle, I just pause for a second. So it's really good advice I've taken from that. So I've added that as a link as well. There are some scenario-based interview questions there that are generally generic, but they're not necessarily linked to program and project or change management. But you can research on those yourself if you want to test it with each other, friends, family members, explore that. There's a handbook there I think the handbook is from an NHS trust somewhere that they use internally that I found helpful. And there's also a TED talk about staying calm in interviews. So there's lots out there. As the obvious thing. So what I'd like in the next 4 or 5 minutes, if nobody's got any questions, can people put in the chat anything that we've not covered that we'd like to discuss in the next 5 to 10 minutes, or what the kind of issues were that you faced with interviews in the past that we haven't discussed, anything like that, or the bits that you find scary that we've not discussed. It's an open forum. Feel free to throw some in the chat or speak to me directly because the slides are not showing now.
Thank you very much, Zahir. That was amazing. Whilst people are putting their thoughts together, I would like to invite Christine to make a quick announcement.
Thanks, Antonia. Hello, everyone. Just a quick HPCA update. Just to remind you, if you haven't done so already, and if you're not a HPCA subscriber at the moment, please do subscribe. You will have seen the links in the chat already, but I think my colleague is going to put it in again. The next community webinar is on 7th of November, 12 till 1. It's on change management, and it's about what's on offer from the HPCA, and it's going to be run by Jocelyn Henry Shaw, who is a member of the HPCA and from NHS England. And we have our next annual conference next year. It's going to be a 2-day event at Conference Aston in Birmingham, 9th and 10th of October 2024. The focus is going to be on what's been delivered in the NHS, projects and change and transformation throughout 2023. And we're going to showcase through case studies, presentations, and share best practice and lessons learned for future and project and change management leaders. So obviously we're looking for people to talk about the projects and who've been involved in projects and what difference they've made. So if you'd like to be part of the event, please let us know and contact us at events@hpca.uk. Thank you. Back to you,
Thanks,
Antonia.
Christine. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right. A big thank you for your time, everyone. I have seen some things in the chat. Zahir is happy to stay back for a few minutes and have one-to-one chats with anybody who wants to discuss anything with him. I know that Denise mentioned in the chat that, oh, it's Tamsin, knowing how long an answer to give and I always seem to end with "and." That is it.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Tamsin. One of the qualities of anybody, whether you work in a work environment or speak to family members, is trying to convey a message in a concise as possible fashion, but ensuring that all the message has been conveyed. Now, particularly, I call it the layering of the onion. You're peeling the onion and you're trying to get to the core. So you talk about stuff and you embellish it, you go into more detail. On average, if you're going to get kind of 8 questions, right, and there's going to be time for you to ask questions at the end, they'll give you a start and end. So I think on average, about 5 minutes for each question. If they're asking 8 questions, that's 40 minutes, and then other things that you need to ask and stuff. So on average 5 minutes, but if you've got your message across in 3 minutes, there's nothing wrong with that. Another question might take 8 minutes because you give other examples. So there's no fast and hard rules, but you have to talk. You have to, as I said, you have to dominate the interview. You need to do most of the talking, 80%, as I'd say. They'll ask you a question, they want to know more about you. Also, you're going to get to ask them questions. They'll probably answer it with that level of context and time as well. So yeah, about 5 minutes on average, but as long as you are getting a message across, that's all that matters.
Thank you, Zahir. There's a question from Hannah. Are there any buzzwords you think are important for project managers to include in application? Or does the NHS use any sort of AI screening tools that you know about?
Well, the latter bit, I don't know if any AI screening is being used. I think we're still a bit old school. I mean, when I first joined HE, I think Florence Nightingale was just declared a retirement at that time. There's still quite old systems we have. I'm not sure. I'm not convinced we're there yet, Hannah, with that. Now, regarding buzzwords, I mean, we talked about earlier about, well, okay, but project managers, program managers, you've delivered with about, the things that you worked on: project initiation documents, milestone delivery, accountability, governance, assurance, issues, risks, SMART objectives, benefits management, output focus, project champions, and also, evaluations. Once you deliver the project, was it delivered on time, to spec, and all the rest of it? What was evaluated? What was the outcome from that? So you've delivered, you worked on a project, so it's closed. Now, what's the ongoing delivery of that? Is it, what's the consequence of that? So a lot of stuff, buzzwords in the, let me just see, I don't know if I've got it at hand at the moment. It's probably for those people who haven't decided. Just bear with me a second.
Okay.
I guess it'll depend while it's loading. I think it'll depend on that once you see the job vacancy. So I wanted to share my screen. I'm not allowed to share my screen, am I, for some reason? It's grayed out. So what I'll do, I'll just put some of these, if I can put in the chat. Just bear with me. Right, just bear with me. I'll answer some of the questions as well. some there, and some other ones as well, and I'll answer the questions. And these are in the slide set that I presented for the job applications in April. So you can get sight of that from that as well. And these are all action words, they're doing words and that kind of stuff. So so some of those. Okay, so I'm going to just go. I'm going to go up. So just bear with me. I've lost the chat there. Just bear with me. Me and my clumsy nature.
Three other questions. Do you want me to read them out?
So buzzwords, yeah, that's fine. I seem to come off too relaxed, and that is a kingdom pursuit as though I don't care about it. This is just all right. Well, that's a really interesting, Kathy. Absolutely. You know, I think personally, I think it's a good quality to be relaxed. It goes to show you can handle a pressured environment. So I think, and you know, the two people that currently report to me, they've got such calming influences on me. They've got calm demeanors, and I love that about him. They're like, it's like the duck syndrome, the paddle away like crazy, but they've got the cool, calm, and collected on the surface. So I wouldn't think that as a negative. But the important thing is you get your message across. That's important. However you do it, you know, you might fluster a little bit, you know, not you, but people will do. I've done it. I've lost my way a little bit interview, then rein myself back, and that's why it's important to fully comprehend the question, so you can pause for a moment and then respond to the questions thereafter. So yeah, definitely, I wouldn't think it as a negative, Kathy, on that. It's switching careers from administrative data analyst, for example. How is it best to present your answers? Factual will be absolutely probably a combination. So if you've had any exposure as a data analyst, definitely weave those examples in. Or if you haven't, and say, you know, we talked about transferable skills earlier, about, you know, the broad set of questions, the type of questions that are going to be asked. Well, you can say, you know what, I meet deadlines, administrators meet deadlines, data analysts meet deadlines. I review content that needs to be accurate and timely. Data analysts do that. I need to work with teams to get validation of the data, as well as administration. I need to sign up. I need to work with teams to make sure we send a response at the appropriate time. All these skills, they're all transferable. So in terms of, but if you're applying for from an administrator's job to a data analyst job, it's important to understand the skills and training and knowledge gap between them. So, and start doing the learning for that now if you want to move into that profession, because you will be competing with people who've already got direct experience. I have to say, I've recruited somebody in my team previously, and they competed with people at interview who have established analysts, but this person had no experience as an analyst at all. But because they performed really well at interview, they showed their passion, they did well at the Excel test, because we told them beforehand, you'll be tested on VLOOKUPs and graphs and charts and conditional formatting. They did a 100% spot on Excel, so demonstrate they can do it. So you then have to demonstrate in the application, more than anything in the application, that you've got the transferable skills and the knowledge. Even if there are gaps in your proper experience, you can say, you know what, this is what I would do under those instances. I've not got exposure in an Excel, but it's got this functionality. I've used these features. I'm willing to learn more, and you do the training now and build up your profile. Ask your line manager to give you the exposure to that kind of stuff. So you establish your foundation now before you apply, so you're in a better footing when you apply for that role. Use a combination, definitely. If you're applying for a senior leadership, how do you compete with other candidates with more experience? You know, that's always going to be a challenge, because you're going to be competing with somebody, and this is why it's important. And we talked about this in the previous session, that ask your line manager if you can go on a secondment, or whether you can take on more responsibility or upscale, or provide cover for your manager, whether on leave or want to work, if you want to work on a project at a senior level. So if you want to apply for a leadership role and you need to understand where the gaps are, well, I need a bit more exposure around writing strategies and policies. I know I want to speak to my manager. Can I spend 1 day a week with that team, learn a bit more about that? You weave that into your application, and that will help you with the shortlist. And so again, if you see a vacancy, and then you look at the job description and you think, okay, goodness me, can't do any of those. 80% I can't. So it means you're applying for a role for which you've not got all the fundamental background skills, experience, and knowledge. So it's trying to fill the gap. How do we do that? Secondments on training courses, job shadowing, academic learning, short-term courses. You can do a lot of stuff to plug those gaps. And then when you apply for the job, you're in a better footing. Otherwise, your role is going to be behind other people who are long established in that role. Hopefully that's helpful.
Awesome.
So I'm just going further down. So, Fazana, another really good question. Strictly speaking, they should only be using the answers to the questions on the interview. The application is there for you to get to interview, and is there to tell your prospective employees, I can do the job. The interview therefore, is there for them to meet you and learn more about your personality, some of the softer stuff, expose a bit more bits of your application and learn a bit more about what you've delivered and how that would then translate to this, which is why I always say, even in the application form, don't only write what you've delivered and achieved in the current role, say how you think you can give examples that I think I can do this in this role and deliver these things because I think there's a lot of potential. So you've already got them in thinking, all right, not only have they got the shortlist for interview, but they're actually telling us how we can advising and guiding on what they can do in their role on offer. So you're already getting to the head, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. I want to learn more about them at interview. So yeah, in terms of making a determination, I don't think, personally, I do think they use a degree of the application form, but generally speaking, and considerably speaking, they're strictly speaking, they should be using the answers to the question because it's on that basis. So thank you, Kathy. And hopefully that's helpful for Zana. Because the scoring's done against that criteria, those criteria, we've got questions, we've got a gap where they write the answers and they do the scoring. Was based on I've interviewed people who've done an okay application, not the best application. Probably of the 8 people I interviewed, they probably did the worst application of the 8 people that I've shortlisted because they had some grammatical mistakes, but I overlooked those. But they were the strongest person on the interview, and I ended up recruiting that person. So on that, you look on the evidence on that day of the interview. Yeah, Fazana, absolutely, 100%. I think, sorry, for those people who can't read that, so some individuals don't interview as well as they write on an application, which is why we're here having this discussion. So, but yeah, absolutely, I've not told this to many people, but I've had a long time, I've had issues with my confidence. And, it's fight or flight. So when you're at work, speak openly in a wider group. There's 20 odd people on the call. I've spoken to 50 people, and I've presented reports and presentations, and it just gives you that boost of confidence. And, as I said before, rehearse. Have mock interviews with family, friends, relatives, work colleagues, and when you're presenting, just stand in front of a mirror and think about the question that you're going to ask and project your voice in front of a mirror, and it's just rehearsing and prepare the answers. You can put notes around the thing, and because you've been going over your application and you're already writing your evidence now, about what your achievements are, your successes, you're gathering all your qualification experiences and achievements, and go through them regularly so they're fresh in your mind. And I promise you, if you keep going through those, you'll be able to recall those at interview, and you'll do really well. You'll flourish, and you think, wow, was that it? I want to carry on this interview for another 2 hours. I genuinely think that's but it's just that initial thing, if you've got issues about projecting stuff while interview, it's using the breathing techniques, your calming techniques, and watching some of those videos about projecting your voice and doing all the research and all that kind of stuff. I think really helpful. So
Thank you very much, Zahe. I am conscious of the time. We've run off the time. It is. I have received some great coaching. Wow, brilliant. I want to say a big thank you, a huge thank you to Zahe, the contributors, HPCA team. This workshop recording and slides will be emailed out to everyone, but you would need to subscribe to HPCA to avoid emails being bounced back by the firewall. And we would appreciate your feedback and your suggestions on future workshops. Let us know if you would like more of this sort of workshops on writing CVs, job applications, and tips and interviews. And yeah, much appreciated. Thank you for your time today, Zahir. Thank you, everyone.